Hello, everyone viewing on YouTube and Facebook. We're starting very promptly at 1 o'clock our time here in Denver, Colorado, but we just wanted to take a moment and welcome everyone to our first town hall. This is just a new time for all of us right now, trying to figure out how to engage our community and stay connected during a time where physical gatherings aren't able to happen like they were before. So we're really grateful for those who have joined us here today. Just a couple of things to note before we get started. We do have a lot of information that we want to share with you, so we want to try to get to it as soon as possible. But if you're viewing on YouTube or Facebook, we have a chat feature on both. And so that is for you to use as your avenue for technical difficulties or any programmatic questions that might come up. We do just want to let you know that we are reserving time at the end of our town hall today to have a Q&A session, and that is where we'll be addressing all of those questions. But you're more than welcome to put those in the chat throughout the presentations and throughout the town hall, but we'll just address those at the end. We also do have some other Water for People staff who are manning those, and so they'll try to help you as best as possible with any technical difficulties. We can't say that we are experts on Facebook and YouTube Live, but we will try our best to help you out, and so that way you can follow along with the video and be able to watch what's going on. Another thing too is if you have to step away during this meeting, or you aren't able to watch the whole thing, or you want to share it with other folks in your network, we will have these videos and the recordings live on both YouTube and Facebook for people to view afterwards. So that's a great resource to keep in mind, just in case that you want to reference this later. And so I guess I also missed introducing myself. You can see my name here is Julia, but my name is Julia Correa, and I've been with Water for People for a little over a year now. And so I'll be here moderating this discussion and getting to share this time with all of my wonderful colleagues that you can see here on the screen right now. And so I'm just really excited to be trying this new avenue, connecting with you all, and welcoming you here to learn a little bit more about our work. And I also do want to acknowledge, I think there are a lot of things in terms of racial relations here top of mind for folks who are calling in from the US. So I just want to acknowledge and make some space for the injustice that we know is happening in our country right now. If you follow Water for People on social media or receive our emails, they put out a really nice message yesterday about standing in solidarity with our Black community and colleagues and friends here in the US. So just want to take some space and acknowledge that. This is a webinar and a town hall focused on our work, but wouldn't be right to go forward without being able to acknowledge that as well. So we appreciate you all showing up not only for this, but showing up for your communities during this time as well. So with that, like I said, I'm really excited to be joined by a lot of my colleagues here today. First of which, I'm going to pass it off to Eleanor Allen, our CEO and fearless leader.
Great, thanks, Julia, and welcome everyone to our first town hall. This is an exciting day for us to be able to share with you through this medium, which is new for us, and hopefully you'll be able to answer some of your questions as we present. And if not, of course, as Julia mentioned, there's the chat as well. So I'm going to give an overview about, general who we are, what we do, and what our global challenge is. So first of all, Water for People, it's about water, a lot of what we do. So nearly 1 in 3 people around the world doesn't have access to safe water. That's hard for us to imagine when we wake up, we take a shower, we make our coffee. But for a third of the world, which is, to put that in perspective, that's like the entire population of the Western Hemisphere, plus Europe, plus Egypt and Pakistan. Huge amount of people don't have that ability to get that water. And then when we look at sanitation, and when we say sanitation, we mean not garbage, but wastewater. But in our case, it's not even water. It's because we're not on sewer systems. It's about people who don't have access to a toilet, really, or a place to go to the bathroom. Even more people, so 1 in 2, half the world really doesn't know where they're going to go to the bathroom, or they don't have a nice place to go. So oftentimes, people have to walk and find a place to go to the bathroom out in the open. And for women and girls, they often want more privacy than men. And so the time spent looking for toilets is a huge time factor of time that can be used for other reasons and for other more productive purposes. If you add up all the time for women and girls just looking for a place to go to the bathroom, 266 million hours a day. And if you put that into something that's more tangible for us, that's like 46,000 girls getting a college education every single day. 46,000 girls getting a college education. So we want to get rid of that and get them to school and get them through college instead of looking for toilets. So why is this happening in our world today? And this is an age-old challenge since the beginning of people. What are the paths to poverty that lead to this, what we call self-supply for water, lack of a toilet? Lots of reasons why. It's not a technology issue. We have technologies, obviously, to get these things done, but it comes down to people, governance, funding, leadership to really put the systems in place. And we're going to talk more about what that looks like. But what is the what happens when you don't have these basic services, water and sanitation? Your health is impacted, your time is impacted, as I mentioned. You don't get ability to go to school long term potentially because you have to go out and fetch water. Or there's not a toilet at school and you hit puberty as a girl and you don't want to go to school anymore because there's no place to change your pads. So you just drop out. So this all leads to lack of economic opportunity and sustainable development. So we want to help move that out of the way so we can bring on easier paths to social progress. Quick fixes don't last. And what we mean by this is going out and just installing infrastructure. So there are organizations today, and we did this in the past too. We just installed wells, and we did a lot with volunteers from North America. We spent money on plane tickets, did the wells, took the pictures, we came home, felt good, and then they failed. And the community started walking past the wells back to their original water supply source, which was often a hand-dug well or a creek or a polluted lake or stream. So we changed our entire model in 2010 to move away from just building infrastructure and not doing things with locally. So now our employees are almost all local, working on our programs. So well-intended donors, we were one of them, installed pumps, celebrated successes, but then they break. No one's trained, there's no money for spare parts, and you revert back to the old system. This happens over and over still today around the world. And so we decided we wanted to change that for ourselves and provide a new model. And so we created our model, Everyone Forever. It's our impact model. It's providing a lasting solution. So the way it works is we want everyone to have access to water, but we want that water service to last forever. So we'll take on a large region. We call it a district. It's like what we would call a county in the US. We do the master plan. We map out who has water, who doesn't, who had water once upon a time, but that's broken. We figure out what it takes as far as infrastructure, but also investment to get everyone water. And then we work on the keeping it going. So the forever part, and setting up the service authorities and the service providers, what we would call a water utility or a water service provider here to make sure the water keeps flowing. So that's our model, Everyone Forever, and it's a model we love to share with others around the world. And it's not proprietary. It's something we try to replicate with others. We don't care what you call it, but just not only look at building infrastructure, but also looking at the operation and maintenance phase, the long-term services. Also wanted to take a few moments to talk about what's happening at Water for People with COVID-19. As you can imagine, it's been a really interesting time for us, as it has been for everyone. But our work is in the epicenter of helping break the transmission of disease. Yet we also have working remotely in the US. All countries have been on lockdown. We're now in different phases of going back into construction. So I'll give you a little bit of update of what's been happening. So now more than ever, clean water is critical. And the good news for us is that people are really paying attention to the importance of having water service, but also hand washing, of course. We talk a lot about hand washing here in the US. That is core to our work around the world. And soap is one of the cheapest lifesavers that there is to just, in this case, break the transmission of COVID. But any disease, bacterial or viral, soap is a great way to break that. So we're committed to continuing our work around the world and helping our communities really complete the work we do, and with even a greater focus right now. Some really good news that's happened to us just trying to remember the date. I guess it was the end of March when Nicholas Kristof ran his column on picked up 5 organizations helping with COVID response. We were one of them because clean water is on the front lines of this battle, and absolutely true. And in our 9 countries, our teams are working really hard to continue our work to the extent we can. And this impact initiative has been wonderful to shine the light on the importance of water and sanitation and disease, and also really help us at Water for People get a boost and get more recognition for the work we do around the world. So in this context, we are really prioritizing what we call our readiness, response, resiliency. So readiness is about our communities getting ready for services. So finishing the construction, and especially in healthcare facilities and schools. And this is what we focused on with the C19 Impact Initiative with Nicholas Kristof, really getting those healthcare facilities and schools, working so we can get the hand washing in place. And then response, been working a lot with messaging and advocacy, working with public health system. They're a partner everywhere we work, the community health workers, ministries of health, along with ministries of infrastructure and water and environment, but just responding to the public health crisis. And then resiliency, really having these actions and systems in place to have the communities ready for the next epidemic, pandemic, whatever it may be, the next public health crisis, because we know there will be one. So those are our 3 R's: readiness, response, and resiliency, that are things we're working on right now around the world. So I did mention that we're highlighting the health clinics in schools. So 273 are what we have in our package to finish off for 2020. We finished 94 so far and reached 38,000 people. So thank you for those who have contributed towards this effort. And with your help, we can reach many more in this year. And if you want to hear more about my thoughts and what's happening with COVID, it's specifically for Water for People, I have some blogs out, and here's one that there's a link to. I don't know how we share the link, Julia, but probably do. So this has been published. It's on our social channels as well, and on my social channels. It's about just how hand washing is a lifesaver and it's a privilege, and we want to be able to keep doing our work so we can really use this momentum of COVID for positive results around the world and saving lives. And then lastly, just if you want more information from me, Eleanor, here's how you can reach me on social, on Twitter and Instagram. I also have a blog, my own blog on Medium. The one I just showed was through the School Foundation's website, but I have other topics on my own blog. And then I have a TEDx talk that you can Google, Why Water is a Women's Issue, one of my personal passions and obviously a professional passion as well. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Kim. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Eleanor. I am Kim Lemmy. I am the Director of Program Learning and Influence here at Water for People, and would love to spend a little time this afternoon talking about what does this look like? Eleanor spent some time walking through what Everyone Forever is, how our model works, but I would love to spend a few minutes just talking about what that actually looks like in practice. I think what we see in philanthropy a lot is the hand pumps that go in, and the taps and the pumps and the pipes that actually get the water flowing. And it's a big part of what we do, but another huge part of what we do is really much harder to see in pictures on social media. And so want to talk through kind of all the different pieces that go behind the scenes to make sure that that infrastructure, those pipes and those pumps keep working over time. So if we can go to the next slide. I'm going to touch quickly on COVID. I think Eleanor covered it pretty well, but fundamental to what this systems approach is keeping water and sanitation services flowing over time. So the COVID pandemic makes the systemic approach even more important, both in the immediate response to COVID right now, but also in the longer term readiness for future pandemics, for future climate change events, and crises that will certainly continue to happen. There's a lot of emergency funding flowing to COVID response right now. And what we continue to tell people that we have conversations with about that emergency funding is hand washing stations are crucial. Getting soap and water for people to wash their hands is really important, but also making sure that those systems aren't just a one-time investment that then lasts for 2 years and get broken, because then the need is to go back and start at square zero. And rather than having to do that, we really focus on how do we keep this infrastructure investment working over time. And that means ongoing replacement, ongoing repair, ongoing maintenance, as well as management, financing, that keep toilets being emptied when they're pit latrines and water flowing from through systems. So that's really key to the forever part of our work. So I'm going to jump into the next slide, I think, is everyone, and that's pretty tangible and pretty easy to wrap our minds around. Every school, every household, every clinic, every community that exists needs access to water and sanitation services that last over time. The forever piece is, how do you make that service last over time? And so what that looks like in practice is it means, yes, initial capital investment in infrastructure. It means government buy-in for understanding their role and participation in keeping this going. One of the goals, actually the ultimate goal of Everyone Forever, is the need for no more future foreign aid. Building into existing infrastructure, existing systems, existing institutions, the role and responsibility of keeping water and sanitation services moving over time and continuous over time is really critical. It's a lot harder to measure. It's a lot harder to keep going because humans are complicated and aren't always able to fulfill the roles that they maybe are being asked to do. So what we do is really closely linked with government institutions and local organizations that are there on the ground and intend to be on the ground forever. Our goal is to leave. Next slide. This might get a little wonky, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but really, if you think about systems, we're not just talking about water systems. We're not just talking about wastewater systems. We're talking about kind of the ecosystem that surrounds all of these things. Water and sanitation sit within a broader municipal system and how the broader municipality works. And it's, kind of sitting right next to and part of health systems. It's sitting next to education systems, which all sit within a broader political economy. And a lot of the systems that we work with here in the US, we're pretty blind to, because when a water pipe breaks in the street in front of my house, someone comes and fixes it. If I call, if my neighbor calls, and I'm kind of oblivious to it, and many of us are, because those systems function generally as intended. And so what we're trying to do is replicate systems that people don't even need to think about, and changing norms and getting people used to high levels of service in terms of water and in terms of sanitation and toilet services. Next slide. I'm going to dive into what some of these other elements of the ecosystem are. We talked about infrastructure, super easy to look and go and see a hand pump, to go and see a tap stand where kids are using tap stands at schools to wash their hands after they use the toilet, before they eat lunch, after they eat lunch, things like that. So that's the easy part. So I skipped that slide, but the operation and maintenance is really key. Here in the US, we have a plumber we can call. We know the utility that is responsible for our water services, for the sanitation services. Sometimes you have to replace your sewer line to the main street. And so those operation and maintenance pieces aren't always in place. And so we work really closely with all the stakeholders on the ground in the countries where we're partnered, and we figure out, what does the operation and maintenance structure need to look like here in this context, and it looks different in urban settings than it does in rural settings. And so creating a mini utility that actually can provide the operation and maintenance sometimes means a private business, just like you and I call a plumber, bringing in a small business owner who can, like this gentleman, come in and make an ongoing, like a maintenance repair, be it small or large. The next slide talks a little bit about the local ownership and the institutions and WASH offices. We all fall, wherever we sit, fall within some utility that provides us our water and sanitation services, or sometimes two utilities if they're separated. And similarly, this gentleman is in Peru, and he is the head of one of the WASH offices in a district where we partner in Peru, and is a natural leader and has seen the district where he works through floods, through recovery from floods, through resilience of floods. And I would argue that because he's a strong leader, he's got the institutions around him doing what they're supposed to be doing, that the recovery from those recent floods within the last few years were much smoother than they would have been otherwise. And so that's an example of when we talk about institutions and WASH offices, how critical the role of the local government is, as well as the other stakeholders, be it a private company that works with providing part of the service, or if it's other community-based organizations or water committees at the community level. The next slide talks about co-investing. All of the work that Water for People does and has done for over a decade is not fully 100% philanthropy. All of it has co-investing. And what that means is local governments, national governments, community members are bringing money to the table to invest in the infrastructure, to invest in the ongoing maintenance and repair. So while water was declared a human right by the UN a number of years ago, people recognize that paying for the service of water delivery is an important thing to do, and having that ownership at the most basic level. It's not like, when someone hands us something out for free at a festival, here we are in the US, do we take very good care of it? Maybe, maybe not. When we buy something, we tend to take a little bit better care of it. And that co-investing is really a critical part to the sustainability and the forever piece of our work. The next slide has us talking a little bit more about tariffs and user payments. And again, that is to ensure that people understand that there's a value in having water delivered to a tap on your property, or having water delivered to a central point in your community that is not taking you hours to walk to, that is safe, of a high quality, and the value of that is really important. We work very closely with the communities to understand what should that payment be. We don't determine that as an external NGO actor. We work very closely with actors on the ground to understand what makes the most sense in this setting. And it's really important to make sure that it's both set in a sustainable way, but that there's also social nets for people who are really unable to pay, and make sure that we're reaching the poorest of the poor and the marginalized communities within any given setting where we're working. So that's another key part of keeping water flowing. Monitoring and evaluation. We live in a very data-driven world, and having data comes from taking surveys and monitoring. And we try to balance that really carefully, because data for us that we may need for external reasons is not always the data that's most useful to the WASH office in a district. And so making sure that we have the data that we need for all the different purposes, for donor purposes, for what the government really needs and finds useful on an ongoing basis, is really critical. And having local governments do monitoring and evaluation that is most valuable to them is really key to keeping water and sanitation services going, and allowing us to, at some point, walk out the door and not worry that all of that investment and time and capacity building falls apart in a short order. So monitoring evaluation is a key part to our sustainability. And the last piece is water resources management, which flows through all of these things, because without water as a resource, without protecting springs, without protecting watersheds, it's really difficult to keep any of this flowing. None of it really matters if there's no water to tap into. And so we partner and work with organizations on the ground who are investing in protection of watersheds, who are looking at making sure that those that the climate change is mitigated, all of those pieces that will keep the water available for the systems that we're building is kind of the final piece and most crucial piece, in my opinion, of sustainability of water and sanitation services. Next slide is really just final thoughts. The bottom line, Eleanor talked about this. Quick fixes lead to broken down and flawed systems. Quick fixes, Band-Aids are not going to last in the long term and are not going to create aid independence, which is really one of our main goals. I think what we are finding in this time of COVID is that there is an opportunity to take this crisis and use it as a way to bridge emergency work with longer term development, making sure that long-term thinking, sustainability thinking is built in at the very outset of the emergency work, rather than there being a gap in between emergency work and longer term development work. And finally, what a lot of this requires is patient capital. This takes years. It's not anything that can be reported out on a 12-month period. You can get milestones along the way within that 12-month period, but certainly this takes years to really change how systems function and how they work in multiple different contexts. Political capital, political buy-in is super important, and building the right policies and laws for governments to fall back on and say, we really need to commit to this over the long term. That is all I have to share today. Kat and Georgia are going to take it from here and carry over and talk about what you can do to get involved.
Thanks, Kim. So by now, I hope you are curious about some ways to get involved. I'll start by sharing what is happening in our digital online space. So of course, we are always fundraising, but right now we are in the middle of our spring fundraising campaign. 3 billion people lack basic hand washing facilities at homes. So hands and hygiene is at the forefront of our messaging. Hands are also on the front lines of human connection, but right now we are so preoccupied with hand washing or the lack of the ability to, and with what our hands might be carrying from germs to viruses. But at Water for People, we're focusing on what else are our hands for. They can be for so much more. They can be for learning, healing, building the future. So we're sharing the importance about all of these through our spring campaign, and you can find it on social media. And we also have an opportunity, since we can't hold in-person events, we have what is being called our Global Mosaic Challenge. And after donating, you can upload an image to what will then be part of a global mosaic of contributed, community-driven photos. You can find out more about that at waterforpeople.org/mosaic. And you can also see a sample of what this will look like when combined into one image. We already have over 100 submissions so far, and it's really exciting to see just this incredible community coming together in this way. So 10 of our partners have also committed to tripling our donations with the Global Mosaic Challenge, truly a way to have your impact go even further. And it does have an optional competition element. So if you want more information about that, just let us know. So we do have our social media channels right there: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. We invite you to join us there, and also on our email list. And I will let my colleague, Georgia, our community engagement manager, share more about that.
Awesome. Thanks, Kat. Hi, everybody. My name is Georgia David. As Kat mentioned, I'm our community engagement manager here at Water for People, and just want to thank you for your time today. I know it seems to be in short supply always, but especially now with lots going on and lots of ways to get involved. And I truly thank you that you are interested in joining us in our quest. I think Eleanor and Kim and Kat have done such an eloquent job in describing why it's so important to get involved. So hopefully I can give you some actionable items that one might strike your fancy, and if not, I'm happy to discuss further other ways. So you'll see here, and Kat did a great segue into this. So subscribe to our Water for People emails is a wonderful way to stay connected and stay engaged in our work. Our team does a wonderful job of I think sending the right amount of emails, not too many, but still making sure that we're informing our audience and our supporters So if you are interested in doing that, it's very easy to do so on our website. I think we're also going to post it in the chat. I can do that after this as well for easy access. Number 2, join your local committee. So if there are any committee members, I saw someone in the chat say earlier that they ran with the for the New York Marathon with our New Jersey committee. So hi, we're happy to have you on. And if you're not already involved, I would love to get you connected. So committees rather are groups that are made up of like-minded individuals who want to support water for people through community outreach, advocacy, and fundraising efforts. So it's really an amazing group of individuals who volunteer their time and I think have a lot of fun in the process. I've been very appreciative to have been involved with so many committees and learning more about what drives their interest. They put on all sorts of fundraising efforts and all sorts of events right now, little different. And as Julia led in the beginning of this, I think, definitely touches on this is the in-person events are not as plentiful these days, understandably so. So getting creative in ways to engage. And I think our committees have shown resilience and done a wonderful job. Staying connected. So if you're interested, we have 55 committees throughout the US and Canada, and I'm happy to answer questions. You can also look at more information on our website about our committees as well. Number 3 is workplace giving. So if you're not familiar with this phrase, it's kind of all encompassing. So a few ways are noted here on the slide. So corporate sponsorships, employee engagement, and cause marketing are 3 different ways that your organization can get involved. If you, again, you'll find a common theme here. If you have questions, I'm happy to talk through. We have an amazing colleague who's actually on here right now too, Julie Kaufman, who runs all of our giving programs and does a wonderful job engaging and really tailoring the best fit for what you think that your organization can do. So please reach out if so. And then lastly, start your own fundraiser. So this is calling all of the creative minds on the chat. Open the floodgates. We would love to support you and however you would like to support us. And I think the beauty of this is especially with peer-to-peer fundraising and when you're investing so much time and energy and effort into it, it should be something that you want to do and love to do, and I'm here to support you in whatever that looks like. So some options and some ideas there. I'm running or hosting a virtual race, donating a special occasion. I'm having a call with a individual who's donating their bar mitzvah, which is amazing, soon. Hosting a drive-in movie night. A couple of our committees are planning on doing that. So all sorts of things to start your own fundraiser and truly an awareness campaign. If the intent is bringing awareness and educating people, absolutely 100% support that as well. So I hope those gave you some good jumping off points. Again, there's many more ways to get involved, and you're welcome to reach out anytime. From here, I will pass it back to Julia. Thanks.
Thank you to all of our speakers. That was really great. And I also appreciate for anyone who has quickly shifted during this time to virtual presentations. It can be really hard to stay on time and synced. And so I really appreciate everyone, all the work that you put in to be able to share this information. I know I asked for a very lofty goal in trying to include all of these pieces in a short amount of time, but I really appreciate all the thought that you all put into your parts of the presentation. So now we're going to open the floor to our Q&A session. And so this is a time really just to hear your questions, hear what you are wondering about our work, about our model. I know both Eleanor and Kim talked about Everyone Forever. So we are going to open the floor to these questions. And so I'm just going to add everyone back to the screen. So just to go a little bit into the details of how this will work, I shared this in the chat and at the beginning of the call, but for those who hadn't joined us at that time, we have both received a ton of questions previously through our RSVP form, and we will be taking questions live through the chat. So I've seen already folks putting questions there as all of our presenters have been talking. And so I will just work through some of the questions that we've had submitted beforehand, and also the questions that are being asked live. I will say we have had a ton come through, so we'll try to get to as many as possible, but we'll continue to share resources after this town hall to answer more questions and try to get you all the resources that might be helpful in answering your questions that you asked. So the first that I'll start off with, and I'll pass it over to Eleanor for this one. I think we've seen a lot of questions come up about specifically where we work, do we work domestically, what countries do we work in, that sort of thing. And so maybe just kind of grounding people in the areas where we work so they have a better idea of that context internationally.
Sure. We work today in 9 countries. So 5 are in Latin America. That's Honduras, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Bolivia, and Peru. In Africa, we work in East Africa, Malawi, Uganda, and Rwanda. And in India, we work in a few states. We work in Bihar, West Bengal, and Maharashtra. And those are the countries we've really focused on since we created Everyone Forever in 2010 till now. And we're in a strategy period through 2021 with those countries. Now, no, we don't work domestically. We get asked that question a lot. We are starting our new strategy period moving forward after 2021. Yes, we're starting now, and it has 2 components. One is our Destination 2030, which is our long-term vision for the decade, and then we'll do a strategic framework for 2021-2025. We're doing this in conjunction with our strategic partner, IRC Wash, out of the Netherlands. And they work in a few more countries than we do, specifically Ghana, Ethiopia, Burkina, and then have started working in Mali, Niger, Bangladesh. I might be forgetting 1 or 2. So as we come together, branching out into potentially more countries, specifically in Africa, also looking at as advisory and consulting services. We started doing this a year ago. They've been doing it for many years all over the world. So that's a way for us to scale. We're really looking to scale in a broadly, so to other countries to take Everyone Forever, and also to scale deeper in our countries to get countries as best we can to SDG 6. There's the 2030 part, and open to evaluating new things as they come up as we do this next strategy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eleanor. And you provided a really nice segue into the next question that I wanted to bring up, which I'll pass to Kim. I think we've also seen a lot of questions about what does scale and sustainability look like for our work, but also within the context of the Sustainable Development Goals and specifically SDG number 6. So can you talk a little bit about what that scale work will look like and what that looks like in the global context?
That's a super important and really good question because we've talked about that a lot here at Water for People. And I think one thing that's key to know is that we understand we are a small, medium-sized NGO that works in this space, and we don't have aspirations to become a $200 million a year organization, $1 billion a year organization, to do it all ourselves. We find that partnerships, we find that working together with others in the sector who are like-minded and who are committed to long-term responses to these problems can learn from us, and that we can learn from them. And so really being open and transparent with our work, that nothing is proprietary. I think Eleanor mentioned that earlier. We really love to share what we're doing with anyone who's interested and see the scale happening that way. Another way we see scale working is working not only with district level governments, which is a lot of what I talked about during my presentation, but having the conversation at the ministerial level in the countries where we work, because the ministers of water, the ministers of environment, whatever ministry water and sanitation services falls under, are really the ones who hold a lot of the power in making this change. And so partnering with them at the highest level, setting priorities together with them, making sure that we are supporting them in their work is another way that scale can happen. One by one, district by district is one way to do it, but it's a lot slower than getting a buy-in at the national level.
That's awesome. Thanks, Kim. And I do want to highlight, we have one comment here from Carol, who I think is viewing on YouTube. And I think it touches really nicely, actually, Kim, to what you just said about how the work on the ground and with partner organizations and local leadership allows us to really scale and expand on our model in a way that we wouldn't be able to do as one organization. So thank you to those who submitted that question, and then Carol for your note as well. So the next one that I wanted to bring up, it just is kind of bringing this back to our work locally. We've gotten a lot of questions from folks about how to be a member here in Denver, Colorado, where Water for People is headquartered, how to be a follower and someone who's passionate about these issues in the US. So I'll give the floor to Kat and Georgia to talk about what are the ways that we can spread our mission aside from the ones that you already shared? And how can people get involved if they're not able, especially now during COVID, to travel?
I can start with one that always comes to mind for me when I hear this question. We have a library of stories on our website that range from people who are local leaders to the individuals we do work directly with when it comes to water and sanitation service. And I can include a link in the comments, but I always encourage people to take a look at that library and read the stories and find a specific one that maybe resonates with you, and then pass that along. And it can be on social media, it can be through email, it can be just having a conversation and just sharing. This is the impact of this work. And yes, it can be very complicated and technical, but it also is real people being impacted, and those are their stories.
That's great, Kat. Yeah, I totally agree. I think our marketing team does an amazing job in really humanizing the content of what we do. And I think sometimes work in, if you are in the US on this, although I've seen many on the chat that are from elsewhere, which is wonderful. But especially for us here in the US, that being that our work is in other places in the world, it can feel a little distant at times. And the stories and the photos, and someone commented in here too that they love the photos, and I completely agree. I think it's just a wonderful way to feel really connected. And then from there, I think being able to be invested in an organization that you support is so important before you start taking action. And that's why I think my answer probably to this is similar to what I had on the slide in our committees, but I think beyond that too, even if you feel that might not be the time in your life when you're able to spend time on a committee, or you don't feel like that's a reasonable way that you can commit right now, that is absolutely fine. And what I encourage you to do is then just support your local committee. Attend their events if they're open to the public. Attend things like this that are held virtually, which is amazing, Julia. And you can engage in all sorts of other ways. And Bob, I love your comment on here too. I think this is a perfect segue into what's Water People's relationship with WEF, Water Environment Federation. So of note for those committees that I had mentioned before and just did as well, majority, if probably 95% of our committees were born out of either AWWA, which is American Water Works Association, or WEF, Water Environment Federation, and are so grateful for the support, the platform, the ability that they give our committees to fundraise and to advocate on behalf of us. So if you're not familiar with them already, that's another great way to get involved, is through your local AWWA section or WEF member association. So tying that question into it. I think the last way I would say to get involved is, and kind of talking about what Kat did, is just share. Talk to people in your life about what water means to you, and kind of just bring up conversations. I think is a really helpful tool to start others' interest in why water matters and why something like Water for People matters.
Georgia, you read my mind. I was just going to bring up Bob's comment here for folks who maybe don't know what the Water Environment Federation, or WEF as we refer to it, is. So thank you. You read my mind. So I'm going to pass it back. I think another question, of course, that Kim and Eleanor, you touched on a lot in your presentations, but of course is top of mind for everyone, is the effect of COVID on our work. And I have this question here, obviously how are current projects and priorities being shifted? And the two things that I would love, maybe starting with Kim, for you to expand on is, one, describing a little bit more about what that push-pull is with emergency work versus long-term development work. And I think something we talk about is mission drift. So how that applies to this situation. And then the other thing too, as well, is someone asked too about how these priorities are shifting long-term goals for Water for People. And so maybe Kim, you can start, and then Eleanor finish us off with that one.
Yeah, I would say that it's a good question, because obviously COVID changes everything for everyone everywhere, and it immediately our offices were closed, and so that means the great work that our team members are doing there on the ground, going out, talking to community members, working with local government officials, all of that was done remotely. And sometimes that's a real challenge when technology and connectivity isn't quite the same as we're used to here in the US. And so our team members did as much as they could from home. We did a lot of calls from home to, kind of team calls internally. But in terms of construction, a lot of the construction was considered essential work around the world. And so we haven't had too much of a halt. There certainly have been some delays because of that, but a lot of the construction of infrastructure was allowed to move forward. But a lot of that community interaction, a lot of that relationship building with local governments, pushing things forward with local government officials and partners has been slowed down a little bit. I have been pretty blown away by the use of technology in keeping things moving. WhatsApp is obviously a favorite around the world and is huge in terms of keeping communication among disparate, people who are forcibly socially distanced, keeping them in constant contact. So I think that there's been a balance of slowing down, but not completely coming to a halt in a lot of our work. And then I'm going to pass it. Eleanor, do you want to take it for the long-term impact, or do you want me to take that one too?
I'll add a few things to yours, and then you can see if I forgot anything. I think another things to mention for the immediate short-term impact is we've been asked by ministries of health and infrastructure, water, environment to help rural communities get the word out on how to do the response. So right away, we were asked to help write manuals and guidance documents, translate in various languages, help get PPE distributed, and do more first responder work, which isn't what we typically do. And now we're really working on how to incorporate this into the resiliency, which we're actually quite good at. We've had to respond to other types of things like El Nino hitting Peru and wiping out infrastructure. Our team had a really good asset management system, and we got funding right away to replace some of that. And Malawi goes between floods and droughts, so we have our team's really pretty resilient there on how to keep things moving in extreme weather conditions. And actually, Africa has had other outbreaks. So, like Uganda is very aware of how to prevent Ebola. So we have learned a lot from them, and like, oh, we got this. We're ready. My last trip was actually Uganda. There was sanitizer everywhere, and people were already wearing masks and giving me elbows, which I didn't really understand what was going on because I was learning. So we're also learning from them and sharing among our different countries for those who've been through these experiences how we help others respond. So that's a short-term response. So I'll pass it back to you, Kim, for the longer one.
And then long-term, really what Eleanor and I have both been talking about is changing how systems are created, implemented, and kept running over the long term. That really fundamentally doesn't change with or without pandemics, with or without climate change. Building systems so they're resilient because these events will continue to happen is really key to our model. And so long-term, we don't anticipate any major change in terms of how we're going about our work.
I would say one potential caveat to that is I think we can build on this to help build our hygiene out to more health and really formalize more the epidemic and pandemic response. So that's something we've talked about just in the last week about how do you really use this and build on what we've been doing for the next, that was my resiliency. The third R is really getting ready for the next one. So being intentional about that more so than we had thought about in the past.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. So this next one I'm going to pose actually to everyone because I think that you all have a different take on it. So we received a couple of questions around what are the misconceptions about water and sanitation access or myths or things like that. And I think that it brought up a good point that, some folks who maybe are new to water and sanitation and hygiene, which we call WASH, might not know exactly how intricate. Hopefully after this presentation, they've got a better idea, but they might not know how intricate and really intersectional this is as a human rights issue and as a public health issue. And so I know for this question here, what misconceptions keep us from making real strides in addressing the water issue, just to kind of start us off, so I'll let you all think, is I think a lot of folks do think that water and sanitation is just about water and sanitation, and that they're missing kind of the intersectionality of how this not only collaborates and affects other human rights issues, but also other sustainable development goals. And so I think that's something, at least in my role with Water for People, that we focus a lot in donor and partner conversations about. You can be really passionate about a women's rights issues. As Eleanor said, women and girls are disproportionately affected by lack of access to water and sanitation. And so you don't have to think of water and sanitation alone. You have to think of it in a gender lens. The same thing if you have to think about it in an economic development lens, in a political lens, they're all interrelated. And so that's something that I really enjoyed having the platform at Water for People to talk about more. And I'd love to hear how you all in social media with volunteers and in our facing relationships break down some of these misconceptions.
Is this a question to all of us?
Yes, and you unmuted Eleanor, so you can go first.
Oh, so we're going to do Mythbusters here now. There's so many things. I mean, I remember just, I'm going to turn it to us, our own misconceptions working in wash space, talking to people that don't understand there's a global water crisis. I had a whole conversation with a woman for an hour about carrying water and girls carrying water. And then after we had a break, and she's like, I don't understand why my daughter can't carry her water bottle. What's wrong with that? And I was like, oh my God, that's not what I'm talking about. So this is such a fundamental difference between high income countries and low and middle income countries. And just so people know what we're talking about there, we use the World Bank descriptors between high income where we are and where, what we would formally say, or some people still do say, the developed world, and then low incomers like between $1,000 and $2,000 a year. So these are people we work with often live under $2 a day. And that's the way it's always been. They always walk for the creek for water. Like a lot of people don't know there's something that you don't do. They don't know that they can use their time and has other value to do more productive work. And then when they have that, what I would call self-enlightenment, like, oh my God, there's an alternative, like, forget this, the status quo shifts, and then they start saying, hey, we want to have what they have in that next community. And this is what happens to us a lot. We'll work in one district and they'll be watching and say, we want to do that too. We do place a value on that water service. We are willing to pay. Another misconception, everyone's too poor, they can't pay. Well, when you value your time and your water, you pay for it. We pay for our water because we don't want to go walk. I don't want to walk to the reservoir to get my water because I want to use that time for something else. So valuing the true value of water, valuing that water, that time, is something that is, I think, a misconception. Understanding how people, what is worth paying for or not, and also the poorest of the poor are often exploited, and especially in urban areas, by buying water from tankers. It's a much higher cost of water than in a water distribution system. So we really want to provide affordable services that are long-term services. So there's a couple Mythbusters, and I'll gave you guys some more time, so I'll let the others chime in here.
I would say the biggest misconception when I have conversations with people is we just need a new technology. It's just a new technology that's needed to solve the water crisis. I've talked with CEOs of major multinational corporations who say, could you guys just try out this? I've got the solution, right? So A, it's a silver bullet, and B, that the silver bullet is in technology. Whether it's desalination or treatment or water delivery or whatever the technology is, so many people think that it's just one simple technological innovation that is going to solve the problem. And the reality is it's a much more human lens problem that needs all of the pieces that we've talked about today.
Absolutely. That's a really good example, Kim. Something that comes to mind for me with the misconception is taking a step away from our work and thinking about the individuals who are supporting us, and that these projects feel really big and forever feels really daunting. And how can a small donation make a difference? But it does really make a difference. And especially when you think about even Eleanor's example of some people have the $2 a day statistic, like that is real, and the money makes a difference in a variety of ways where we work. And we don't break out costs per project necessarily, and that's because we bake in all of those sustainable elements of our work, and that's all possible because of the flexible support and all of the small donations that come together to make an impact.
And I can just add one really quickly. I know we've talked a lot on this one, and I'm so grateful to be on this with you. I feel like I'm learning so much from all my colleagues as well. Something in my world, I'm very thankful that the committee members that I work with, they are the ones that impassion and embolden me and give me energy and excitement. And I think something we've had a lot of discussions around, both internally and externally, around Misconception is our work in Latin America specifically. And we have had a lot of committee members who are very, very educated in their spaces. And I think that it's been wonderful to see the outreach in that the misconception that some parts of the world need water more than others, and that there's more work being done in other places because Latin America is fixed, which is unfortunately not the case. And we're continuing to work where we hopefully that will be the case, and then it won't be a misconception any longer. But I think that's been a big discussion in the water industry.
Wonderful. Thank you all. I know I sprung that as a group question, but I think having all of your different angles on what are misconceptions and what are kind of myths that we can break down. I think you all did a great job on being Mythbusters here for a minute. And I just want to bring up one comment that we have here from a viewer as well. Kat, I think you touched on this as well, but just the way that our model is and really having that district-wide approach and being willing to have specific and catered solutions to each community kind of makes a question like this hang out, which we do receive a lot. How much does one well cost? How much does one hand pump cost? A little bit different for us because it really does differ based on the community, based on the population that is being served and being reached with that water services and sanitation. And so I think that this is one that we would be happy to talk about more in depth and we can provide some resources. But I think for me too is another myth as well that I think Kim reached is a lot of our work is the behind the scenes. You can't really capture it as well in a photo because it's about advocacy and outreach and influence and political power and things like that. So I really do appreciate you bringing this up because I think a lot of folks do think about it in this way as well. So the last piece that I think, because we're coming up on time here, and so I appreciate everyone who is sticking with us until now, is this focus on what does forever look like. I think that we are talking about everyone forever as our model, but that forever piece, I think it's weird to conceptualize something lasting forever. So Kim, if you could just briefly touch on this, and then I'll close us out with one additional question for Eleanor.
Yeah, it really looks like us and other NGOs that do similar work kind of having to find a new job, finding new work and passions to throw to spend our time doing. And what that looks like, how do you get there, is actually shifting the paradigm from those huge numbers that Eleanor started us out with, 1 in 3 people and 1 in 2 people in terms of water and sanitation service access, changing the access, but then changing how long those services can last over time. And so it means governments having the capacity and support to actually do this on their own over the long term, and to understand what it means when you hit a roadblock, when you have a major catastrophic climate event that wipes out a whole bunch of capital investment in terms of infrastructure. How do you rebuild that? What are the systems that actually are in place to respond to that? So it's a really complicated milestone. We've got, and I didn't go into that level of detail in my slides, but we do have something that Julia, we can share out that talks about the different metrics that we have in terms of how do we know when a country or a district is at the point where they don't need us anymore. And we have some examples of that in Bolivia right now that we're working on, kind of slowly backing out of the room because they don't need us anymore. And how do we do that most gracefully without things falling apart, without making sure that those things happen and continue to be responded to over time?
Before my last question, Juliet, I'm just thinking of Kim's example of Bolivia because I get really excited about it. But one thing that I think to equate to life in the US is like the level of service can be maintained. So if we think about our homes, like I'm in Denver, I wake up, my water runs. If I wake up and my water's not running, I'm like, hey, I got to call Denver Water. Like, what's going on? My water's not running. So the interruptions, the level of service and water quality and that things keep running. That's when we do, as Kim said, we step back and we're like, hey, they got this, and they call us if you need us. They have the lab in place. They can test the water quality. They're managing their water resources. They have the operation and maintenance crews working. They know what to do. They're managing their assets. We're stepping back that whole time, but we're watching, and we're, accessible. And it's really cool to be in those communities when they're like describing our work, our organization's work to us, but in a much better way than I can articulate it here. And that's when we know, time to move on to get a new job, as Kim said. So sorry, just had to get excited for a minute about that. All right, Julia.
No, yeah, that is great. I think that it's a very important thing to get excited about. And I know as an organization, we've really rallied around the success we're seeing in Bolivia and how that can be replicated. So like I said, I know we're coming at time, but I did want to include one more question that I think is not only really important to the work that we do and the role we play in the international development sector, but also to the current climate here in the US as well. And so we had a really thoughtful question submitted about, and specifically to Eleanor, as someone who has a really long history in the engineering sector and as a leader in that sector as well, about what are the role of engineering firms. But I think that really applies to any organization or company right now in standing up and speaking up for Black Lives Matter movement. And I think that as an organization, we don't specifically work with race relations here in the US, but human rights is something you've seen a theme throughout our presentation, is something very close to our mission and our work that we do. So Eleanor, I was just wondering if you wanted to share any, personal reflections, and also as an organization about what is our role and how do you take that stance what is happening right now in the US?
Yeah, thanks, Julia. A very complex situation we're all in, and coming to work Monday. So all weekend I spent time with my teenage sons talking about the issues, and that was like, okay, what can I do as Eleanor to be influential as a white American? And then coming to work is like I was going to work, and then we had the conversation at work too, like what can we do, and what is our role, and how do we, no, we do water and sanitation, but no, we do water and sanitation because Black Lives Matter, every life matters, brown lives matter. All the people we serve are the world's most vulnerable, and we're trying to bring them water and sanitation, but it's all about, equality. So absolutely we have a role. So I think of it in various different kind of layers of the onion. So there's our own our own issues in the US. How do we spend our personal time? What do we believe in as an organization in Denver, as the US? Yeah, we don't work in the US, but we can educate ourselves. We can test our own biases. We can learn from our other colleagues because everyone comes at this with a different view. We can provide resources so that we continue our own personal learning and figure out how we impact our country, even though that's not our everyday work. And we've actually had several meetings this week about how we can do that, and we'll continue to have these conversations, how we can continue to work on our diversity, equity, inclusion program internally. We also have a program in our communities to get different disadvantaged and women into leadership roles in the communities where we work. So it's also a power shift to other people. So and then when we did all employee communication, we've done an external one, as Julia mentioned as well. Interesting feedback I'm getting from around the world, like, hey, this is really, even though it's a U.S. issue specifically at this moment, it is our issue too, because we have other type of inequalities, and we want to, we're going to use this as our voice to help raise awareness and show that we are committed to Black lives everywhere, to our own people, and to our own the injustices that we can try to influence and change. So we've been busy, and I'm sure we will continue to be, but really figuring out what we can do internally to grow and to support our employees, and then also how we can continue to evolve our programs to really serve our mission. It's about quality and services for water and sanitation.
Thank you, Eleanor. wonderfully said, and I think I'm really grateful for everyone who's still on the call with us. I know we are just a couple minutes over, so we apologize if we weren't able to get to your specific questions, but we hope that we addressed a lot of the themes that we saw in the questions submitted. So thank you again to everyone who did that. And so for now, I'm going to end our presentation here, just saying a huge thank you for everyone who showed up. I know this is a new space and a new way of engaging with Water for People, but we really are grateful to see, at least for me, the little views that I can see on the screen and the comments that we've seen come through. We really do appreciate it. And also we'll be sharing, like I said, additional information based on the resources that were requested during this call. Also just wanted to share here as well, my name, Julia Correa, and my email. So if you have any questions or would like to get involved, I'm going to be sharing some of the contact information from my colleagues who are here on the call as well. But again, we really wanted to say a huge thank you for joining us. This is a first for Water for People, and hopefully there will be more. So thank you, Kat, Georgia, Eleanor, and Kim, and everyone who's on the line today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
And thank you,
Thanks.
Julia.
Bye, thank you. Thanks for attending.